All right, folks, you're going to have to bear with me. You may hear a little whirling in the background. That's basically a low-level fan going because the air conditioner in this particular room went out. And without that fan, I probably would pass out. That being said, I came across this particular subject, and I have a lot of ways of going at it. Let me start with what I consider to be the primary ruling situation. Representation, okay? Taxation. Two things that are valued in this country. Now, on the representation side, we really love that piece. The taxation, not so much. But at the formation of this country, those two items were linked. So if you recall a famous statement saying, taxation without representation doesn't work. Yeah, that's not the exact saying, I'm paraphrasing. But we fought a war because of the lack of representation within the British government. But they were taxing the heck out of us. And obviously, you know your history, Revolutionary War, we won, here we are today. But that war was pretty much primarily fought because the colonists were being taxed, but they had no representation with the British government. Okay. Let me expound upon that a bit. In the 1860s, approximately 1868, after black people were freed, they created the 14th Amendment. And pretty much the 14th Amendment, in a nutshell, was to address equal protection and rights for former slaves. The 14th Amendment limits the action of states and local officials in addition to equal protection under the law to all citizens. The amendment also addresses what is called due process, which prevents citizens from being illegally deprived of life, liberty, or property. Now, that last line, which prevents citizens from being illegally deprived of life, liberty, or property, that's in the Constitution. But unfortunately, the writers of the amendment left it up to the states to determine what was illegally depriving a person of life, liberty, or property. Now, normally when you owe a debt and you pay the debt, you are free and clear of the debt and can go on about your merry way. That's normally the case unless you are convicted of a felony in approximately 38 states. If you are convicted of a felony, the state obviously is going to have you pay a price, i.e. in the loss of liberty, for a prescribed period of time. But, and here's the caveat, even after you have paid your debt to society, the bill is still running. I say that because when you are released from jail, prison, etc., after you have done your time, your rights are not always reinstated. And I'm speaking in particular about the right to vote. Now again, if you're lucky enough to get a job, obviously you're going to have to pay income tax, taxation. But unfortunately, that felony conviction on your record now will possibly preclude you from obtaining any type of government assistance, i.e. education, housing, etc. Now you've paid your debt and you are now back in society and with a job. Uncle Sam is got his hand in your pocket for his taxes, yet you are now considered a second-class quasi-citizen because a citizen has the right to vote. Now, I bring this up because in the state of Alabama, they have just voted on a new bill and passed it, and it was signed by Republican Governor Kay Ivey. The bill, titled the Definition of Moral Turpitude Act, now defines what felony convictions may temporarily restrict someone from voting. Now, if you didn't know anything about Alabama, let me give you a little history lesson. After the slaves were freed, they had some big issues because there were huge numbers of black people that, after the 14th Amendment was signed, had a protected right to vote. But that protection was up to the individual states that the person resided in. So, what did the good people of Alabama do? They created a state law that stated basically that a person of low moral turpitude who had committed any type of a criminal act would no longer be able to vote. And there was a list of, I believe, approximately 500 crimes. Now, this particular law, even by the authors of the law, was targeted towards black people. Specifically, this gentleman said, and I apologize for not having his name, but he said when he drafted the particular law, this law will stop the, I'm not going to use the word, certain people of a darker complexion from voting, because we consider any crime that they commit a crime of severe moral turpitude. Well, obviously that was on the books for well over 100 years, and anytime a black person got arrested and convicted of any crime, something as simple as jaywalking, they were subject to have their right to vote taken away from them. Anyway, let me read you the entire story about the reinstatement of a lot of people's right to vote. In Alabama, certain crimes of moral turpitude can keep someone from voting. Until now, only a handful of convictions were listed, leaving the unlisted convictions up to potentially different interpretations across county lines. Former Tuscaloosa mayoral candidate Stephen Lewis had to go through hoops to have his voter rights restored in order to get on the ballot or cast his vote. His 1992 drug conviction is not on the new list of offenses. He believes the new law will make it easier for others who fall into the same category. You just kind of feel like your voice will never be heard and you're not really full-fledged. You don't belong, said Lewis. After turning his life around, Lewis worried the mistake in his past would always hurt his ability to shape the future. There's some things you don't know how big they are until you don't have them anymore, said Lewis. For programs which help convicts get back on their feet, the new law provides clarity. It's consistent throughout the state. It helps reentry programs that are helping people in different counties, said Katie Mitchell, a case manager at the Dannon Project in Birmingham. Mitchell said regaining the ability to vote is a big step forward for those with a previous conviction. When we get these people to take ownership in their community and they feel like they're a part of Birmingham, they're invested in it, then they don't want to cause problems, they don't want to continue to commit crimes, said Mitchell. Even those with convictions that fall on the moral turpitude list can apply to have voter rights restored. Lewis thinks the new law will make it easier for people to get back to the polls after time behind bars. People should have the opportunity to change their lives and move forward, said Lewis. Shay Farley, policy counsel for the Southern Poverty Law Center, estimates the new list may impact a few thousand people. She said the new law should allow for more consistency. You could go to your board of registrars in Montgomery County having committed the same crime as your sibling in Jefferson County and be told two separate things about your right to vote, said Farley. Now, I'm going to attach the law with the current list of crimes that will take away your right to vote. Now, that being said, Florida, which is the most egregious state in the country as far as getting your right to vote reinstated, well, one of the U.S. House of Representative members from Florida has introduced a bill, the No One Can Take Away Your Right to Vote Act. And the person that introduced it was Alan Grayson. He's a Democrat out of Florida. Now, that particular act, if it can be passed, would amend the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to prohibit states from disqualifying individuals convicted of criminal offenses other than individuals convicted of murder, manslaughter, or sex crimes from registering to vote or voting in elections for federal office. Now, in my mind, that's the way to go. So it looks like, for whatever reason, people are coming around and realizing that the right to vote is key to our identities as American citizens. And in my opinion, after you've done your time, including probation and paid whatever fines that are required, your right to vote should be automatically reinstated. Now, Texas, on the other hand, if you weren't aware of it, had passed some of the most restrictive voting rights laws in the country. And just to let you know that these people don't believe fat meat is greasy, the law was found to be unconstitutional, not once, not twice, but 3 times. 3 times the state of Texas went to the Court of Appeals in order to have lower court decisions regarding the obviously racist nature of their voting laws reinstated. 3 times the Court of Appeals said, no, your laws are discriminatory. They attempted to go to the Supreme Court in order to strike down the Court of Appeals ruling, but the Supreme Court declined to hear their case and instead instructed them to go back down to the Court of Appeals and to get the situation fixed. Well, the federal judge gave the state of Texas a certain amount of time in order to fix this law to make it non-discriminatory. Well, last night, the Texas state legislature, being under time restraint because the judge only gave them a limited amount of time in order to get it fixed before she ruled that they were going to have to come under federal jurisdiction regarding making any changes to their voting laws. They came up with a quote unquote, my words, BS fix that they passed. Now, the Democrats all voted against it and said that there's no way that that law is going to be able to pass muster. But just leave it to those Texas Republicans. You know, they bang their head against the wall, and even when they see blood on the wall, they're still going to continue to bang their head instead of doing the right thing. This is just another example of some people just getting it wrong and being unwilling to do the right thing. So, folks, again, hopefully the law that's coming through or going through the U.S. House of Representatives will get passed. It'll pass in the Senate, and then there will be specific guidelines for people who have a felony on their record to have their right to vote reinstated so that they are able to access the full franchise of America.